The great alien council chamber echoed with laughter. Not the kind of joyful laughter, but cruel, sharp laughter that cut through the heart like a blade. The elders, dressed in glowing robes, sat in high chairs, watching a nervous young alien girl stand quietly before them. Her name was Lyra, and today she was being given away. "Send her to the human," one elder said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Let him think it's a gift. A bride. She is weak, unwanted," another laughed. "Perfect for a joke." Lyra kept her head down. Her silver hair fell over her face, hiding the shame burning in her cheeks. She was not a warrior, not a leader, not even a scholar. She was a mistake born into a proud bloodline. They had mocked her since childhood, and now they were sending her off-world to embarrass her one last time. The chosen human was a captain named Elias Stone, a man known for surviving deadly battles. He had agreed to take part in a peace program between humans and aliens, a bride exchange, they called it, but the aliens never intended to send anyone important. Instead, they chose Lyra, the forgotten girl. When Lyra arrived on the human space station, she expected laughter, rejection, or worse. But Captain Elias didn't laugh. He didn't even look surprised. He simply looked at her and said, "Welcome." She blinked, confused. He reached out his hand to her, and when she didn't take it, he simply nodded and said, "Take your time." The room was small but warm. Elias had set up a separate bed for her. He gave her a soft blanket, a warm drink, and even showed her how to use the translator device. Lyra watched him carefully, waiting for the trick, waiting for the cruel joke, but none came. Days passed slowly. Lyra barely spoke, and Elias never forced her. He talked to her about Earth, about his old dog, about the stars he loved watching from the deck window. He cooked his own food, shared it with her, and never once looked at her with pity or mockery. Late one night, Lyra sat on the floor beside the bed, holding a glowing crystal hidden in her necklace. It was something her mother gave her before she died. Her fingers trembled as she whispered in her own language, "Why is he kind to me?" The crystal pulsed gently, but gave no answer. She looked up and saw Elias asleep, his face calm, the room peaceful. She had never known peace like this, not even for a day on her home planet. The next morning, Elias handed her a simple book with pictures and words. "Want to learn English?" he asked with a smile. Lyra took the book slowly. Her eyes scanned the first word. "Hello," she repeated it in a soft voice, shaky and unsure. Elias clapped his hands once. "That's it," he said. "You're a fast learner." Something strange stirred inside her chest. Something warm, something new. She had never been praised before, never been told she was good at anything. A week later, she whispered his name in her sleep. She didn't know he heard it, but when she woke up, the small implant hidden deep inside her spine, a leftover from an old failed experiment, began to blink for the first time in years. She felt something change in her body, but said nothing. Instead, she smiled faintly when Elias handed her tea. It was the first real smile he had seen on her face. Back on her home planet, the council members received news that she had not been rejected. They were disappointed. The joke was supposed to humiliate the human too, but instead, Lyra was accepted. "She's just pretending," one elder said. "She'll break soon." But Lyra didn't break. She started to laugh softly at Elias's jokes. She began learning words quickly, and her eyes no longer looked empty. She still slept lightly, sometimes waking up with a jolt, but Elias never asked questions. He simply kept the lights low and stayed nearby one evening. As a meteor shower danced outside the window, Lyra looked at Elias and said quietly, "Why?" "Kind." Elias looked surprised at her question. He thought for a moment, then said, "Because no one should feel unwanted." That night, Lyra placed her hand over the hidden mark on her skin, a birthmark that shaped like a half-sun. She didn't know why, but it began to glow faintly under her fingers. A word came to her mind, old and forgotten. A word in a tongue she had never spoken. She whispered it, and somewhere deep inside the ship, A locked signal activated without warning. Lyra gasped and dropped to her knees. Her head ached, her heartbeat raced. Something inside her had awakened, and it all began with a joke, the first time she touched the human's hand. It wasn't planned, it happened by mistake, a soft brush. While passing the tea mug, but something in her chest jumped. Lyra pulled her hand back quickly and looked away. Elias didn't say anything, he just smiled the same calm smile he always wore. But that moment stayed in her head all night. She was not used to warmth, not in words, not in touches. She had lived among people who only spoke to hurt or command. Now this human, a stranger from a wild world, was kind without asking for anything in return. In the quiet of the ship, she started mimicking his words in secret. She would sit in the corner and whisper them under her breath. Thank you, good morning, safe. Sometimes he caught her doing it, and he would pretend not to notice. But she saw the small smile he tried to hide. The space station was cold, made of metal and silence. Yet the room where Elias stayed with her felt warm, alive. She found herself listening for his footsteps, the sound of his laugh, even his sighs. Elias never asked about her planet. He never questioned why she was sent to him. Maybe he guessed the truth. Maybe he didn't care. But Lyra started to care. One evening, she saw him sitting by the window, watching the stars. She walked over slowly and sat beside him without a word. He handed her a small drawing pad with a pencil. She looked at it, confused. He said, "Sometimes drawing is easier than speaking." She held the pencil with awkward fingers, then carefully, she drew her home, at least what she remembered. Tall white towers, cold blue skies, faces with no smiles. Elias looked at the page and said quietly, "Looks lonely." She nodded then. He took the pencil and drew a tiny stick figure standing beside hers. She stared at the page, not understanding at first. Then she looked up at him. He didn't speak. But the message was clear. You are not alone anymore. That night, something inside her heart cracked open, just a little, and something hidden inside her body responded again. The implant pulsed faintly, unseen under her skin. Her blood was changing, slowly, quietly. She began dreaming in two languages alien. Words mixed with human phrases, and sometimes she dreamed of him, not as a joke, but as something else, something close. Back on her homeworld, the council grew uneasy. They hadn't received any failure reports, no signals of rejection or disgrace. Instead, they heard silence, and silence was dangerous. They sent a message to her body implant, ordering her to return, but the signal reached too late. By then, her body had started responding to something older, deeper. The mix of her blood and his presence had done something no one predicted. The next morning, Elias found her staring at the mirror, touching her face. He asked, "You okay?" She blinked and slowly turned to him, then said in a low voice, "I feel different." He stepped forward, concern on his face. "Pain?" he asked. She shook her head. "No, not pain." Alive. Elias didn't understand what was happening to her, and neither did she. But one thing was becoming clear. Whatever she was turning into, it wasn't just alien anymore, and she didn't want to go back. Not now, not ever, because for the first time in her life, someone had touched her hand. Not to own it, but to hold it, and that changed everything. The first time she laughed, it shocked even her. It wasn't loud or wild, just a small, breathy sound that escaped her lips before she could stop it. Elias had dropped a bowl of soup on the floor and muttered something under his breath. It wasn't even that funny, but the way he stared at the mess with a helpless look made her giggle. He froze, looked up at her, and smiled. "You laughed," he said gently, like it was the most important thing in the world. She looked away quickly, embarrassed, but her cheeks were warm, and her chest felt light for the first time since she left her planet. In the days that followed, the small cabin on the space station became a quiet home. Lyra began to hum softly when she cleaned. She started to eat more, sleep better. The cold tightness in her chest began to fade. But something else was happening too, something strange. She felt it each morning. Her senses were sharper, her balance smoother. Sometimes her skin tingled. And when she touched a broken tool, it fixed itself without her understanding why. Elias noticed but didn't question. He had learned that Lyra was full of quiet mysteries, and he gave her space. But one night, when the power flickered in the station and the lights went dark, something changed. Lyra stood completely still, then raised her hand toward the wall, without touching anything. The lights came back on, steady and strong. Elias looked at her in the glow. "Did you do that?" he asked, not with fear but with curiosity. She didn't answer. Not because she didn't want to, but because she didn't know. She sat down on the floor, holding her knees close. "I'm changing," she whispered. "I don't know what I'm becoming." Elias crouched beside her, not touching her, just near enough to let her know he was there. "Maybe that's not a bad thing," he said. "Maybe it means you're becoming who you were meant to be." That night, Lyra dreamed of her mother. A soft voice, a gentle hand, a goodbye whispered. In the dark, and then a flash of light, a hidden chamber, a secret never told. When she woke up, her pillow was wet with tears. She didn't remember crying. Far away, hidden in deep space, her people were watching. The council had sent a new observer, a shadow unit. They had noticed her vitals were changing. Something was wrong, or rather, something was evolving. She was supposed to be a joke, one elder hissed. She was supposed to come crawling back, but she hadn't, and now her biosignals were no longer fully alien. The human had not just accepted her. He had altered her, somehow, without even knowing it. Lyra stood outside the cabin one evening, looking at the stars. Her hand rested gently on her belly. She didn't say anything, didn't even fully understand it yet. But deep inside her, a small spark of life was forming. It was not part of the joke, it was not part of the plan. It was something real, something new. She didn't tell Elias yet, not because she didn't trust him, but because the truth felt too big for words. She needed time to understand what she was carrying inside her. For now, she smiled when he brought her a blanket. She laughed softly when he tripped over his boots, and each time their hands brushed. She no longer pulled away, back on her homeworld. The council made a decision. If she wouldn't return, they would bring her back by force, but they had no idea what she had already become, or what would be waiting for them when they arrived. The joke had gone too far, and now, it was no longer funny, it was alive. The alarm didn't go off, but something made Lyra wake up, a cold stillness in the air. Too quiet, too sharp. She sat up slowly, the small lights of the cabin flickering weakly. Elias was gone from the room, but his coat still hung on the wall. She heard a strange click outside the door, like boots crunching metal. She stepped closer to the door without thinking. Her body moved lightly now, faster than it had weeks ago. Whatever was changing inside her, it had given her more than just peace. It had given her awareness. She opened the door a crack, her heart thudding quietly. Outside in the cold hallway of the station, 3 shadows moved near the entrance. Not station workers, not traders, something else. One of them carried a weapon, long and dark, not human-made. Lyra's eyes widened. She knew that shape, elite. Trackers from her homeworld, they had come for her. She closed the door slowly, locking it with shaking fingers. But even as she stepped back, the door pulsed red, warning of a remote override. They were breaking in. She turned quickly, grabbed the communicator Elias had left on the table. But before she could speak into it, the door hissed open. 3 tall figures entered, silent, masked, armed. Lyra stood her ground. Even though her legs trembled, one of them pointed at her, voice flat and sharp through the helmet. "You were given for shame, not for mixing blood with him." Her hands curled into fists. "I didn't ask for this," she whispered. "I didn't choose your cruelty." The tallest one stepped forward, aiming his weapon. "You will come with us," he said, "or we will drag you." Suddenly, a loud thud came from behind them. Elias, breathing hard, covered in oil and smoke, held a metal pipe in both hands. "I don't think she's going anywhere with you," he said. His voice was calm. but his eyes burned. The three turned to face him, one raising a blaster. But before they could fire, Lyra lifted her hand. Her fingers glowed faintly, and the weapon sparked, then exploded in the attacker's grip. They stumbled back, shouting. Elias charged forward, swinging the pipe. The room filled with chaos shouts, crashing metal, sparks flying. Lyra moved without fear. She grabbed the second attacker's arm and twisted it backward, strength flowing through her like a river. The last one ran, but Elias slammed the door shut before he could escape. After a short, brutal moment, the cabin was quiet again. 3 armored bodies lay groaning on the floor, their weapons useless. Elias turned to Lyra, chest rising fast. She looked back at him, her eyes glowing faint blue. They both stood there, not speaking, but everything had changed. "You're not normal," he said finally. With a breathless smile, she gave a slow nod. "No," she whispered, "and neither is this." Later, after the intruders were locked in the station's old storage chamber, Elias sat beside her near the fire. He didn't ask questions right away. He simply placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "Thank you for saving me." She looked at his hand, then slowly rested her own on top of it. "I think we saved each other." Far above, her homeworld received a report. The mission had failed. The target had changed. She was no longer just the joke bride. She was something more now, something powerful. And worst of all, she wasn't afraid anymore. The message came not by screen or signal, but through the pulse in her veins. Lyra was sitting alone, staring at the broken armor pieces from the attackers, when a deep hum began inside her body. It wasn't pain, it was a call, an order from far away. Her people had activated the blood command, the final signal to summon her back. But Lyra didn't rise, didn't pack, didn't answer. She stayed still, breathing slowly, her hand resting over her stomach. Something was growing inside her, something fragile and bright, and no one, not even the elders, was going to take it from her. Elias stepped into the room, holding 2 cups of hot water. He saw her face and stopped. "What happened?" he asked, voice low. She looked at him, eyes glowing faint blue again. "They want me back," she whispered, "but they don't understand what I've become." He sat beside her, not asking more. He didn't need to. He knew that look in her eyes. It wasn't fear this time. It was a storm holding itself in silence. That night, Lyra placed both hands over her belly and whispered something ancient. Words she didn't know she knew, sounds that echoed like wind through mountains. And for a moment, the lights in the cabin flickered again, not from power loss, but from her. Elias watched in quiet awe. He had seen many strange things during war, but never something like this. Never someone who could sing with light. The next morning, the station's outer sensors picked up a new ship. It wasn't human, and it didn't dock. It hovered above silently. It was her people, watching from orbit, waiting for her to surrender. But Lyra didn't pack her things. She stood outside the cabin, eyes locked on the sky, her body wrapped in Elias's old jacket. "I will not go," she said out loud, knowing they were listening. "I choose my path." Back on the ship, the council's watchers recorded her words. They played them to the elders, expecting rage, but what followed was silence, deep and long. Then one elder spoke. "She's carrying hybrid life," he said coldly. "It must not be allowed." Another leaned forward, voice colder. "Send." The collector. Back on the station, Lyra's heart raced as she felt the pressure build in her bones. She didn't know what a collector was, but something in her blood did, and it was afraid. Elias loaded his gear quietly, his eyes sharper than usual. He didn't tell her to run. He knew she wouldn't. Instead, he stood beside her at the window, hand resting near hers, not touching, just close enough. "If they come," he said, "we fight together." She nodded slowly, but in her mind, she knew this fight wasn't just for survival. It was for the right to live as who she had become, a being born of 2 worlds, carrying something more valuable than power, hope. That night, she dreamed of her child for the first time. She saw tiny fingers, wide eyes, glowing softly like stars. And in the dream, someone whispered, "They will fear what they cannot control." When she woke, her body felt warmer, her heart steadier. She knew the time had come. The joke was over. And the world that laughed at her was about to face what it had created. Not a failure, not a shame, but a mother, and mothers do not kneel. The collector did not speak when it arrived. It came in a silver drop pod that landed in silence, just outside the outer station wall. There was no warning, no light, no sound, just a hiss as the door slid open. And something stepped out wrapped in black metal. Lyra felt it before she saw it. The air inside the cabin shifted, growing heavier. Harder to breathe, her heart began to race, and her fingers curled tightly against her sides. She didn't need to ask who it was. The collector had come for her. Elias was already awake. Strapping on gear with calm hands, he looked at her and nodded once. "No more running," he said. She didn't answer with words, only took his hand and held it for one long moment. Then they walked together toward the entrance. The station lights flickered as they moved through the hall. Every step felt like the air was fighting against them, and when the front door opened, they saw it. The collector stood tall, not shaped. Like a person, not fully. It was machine and flesh, ancient and deadly. Its face covered by a black shield that reflected nothing. In its hand was a weapon that didn't shine, didn't blink. It just pulsed softly, like a quiet heart waiting to stop another. "You carry unauthorized life," it said in a cold voice that echoed inside their minds. "You will surrender the growth." Lyra's breath caught in her throat. She stepped forward slowly, standing between Elias and the collector. "You cannot have it," she said. Her voice didn't shake. The collector tilted its head. "Then you will be erased." Before Elias could raise his weapon, the collector moved too fast. It rushed forward. But Lyra lifted both hands, and the ground shook beneath their feet. A wave of energy burst from her palms, throwing the machine backward into the air. It landed hard, but it was already rising again. Elias fired, the blast hitting the side of its armor, slowing it for a moment. But it didn't bleed, it didn't fall, it just kept coming. Lyra's eyes glowed brighter now, blue turning to silver. She raised her voice, not loud, but sharp like glass. "No more control." The station lights exploded above them, sparks falling like fire. Power surged from her body as she moved faster than she ever had before. She clashed with the collector in the middle of the room, her hands blazing with raw force, each blow. She landed cracked the air, but the collector fought back. It struck her side, and pain flashed through her body. But she didn't fall. Elias charged in, swinging hard. He managed to break one of the collector's side limbs, metal sparking and hissing. Together they forced it back, step by step, until finally, Lyra raised both hands above her head. The room turned white with light, and with one final cry, she brought her hands down, smashing the ground beneath the collector. It collapsed into the crater, unmoving. For a moment, there was only silence. Lyra fell to her knees, gasping, her body shaking. Elias rushed to her, catching her before she collapsed completely. She looked up at him, eyes wet. "I protected it," she whispered. "I protected us." He held her close, not saying anything, because nothing needed to be said. Far above, in the orbiting ship, the council watched the feed go dark. The signal from the collector was gone, and the room was silent. One elder stood up slowly. "We made a mistake," he said. The others did not disagree. They had sent her away to mock the humans. But she had become something new, something they could not command, and now she was coming home. Not alone, not weak, and not the same girl they had thrown away. No ship had ever landed on the Capitol steps without permission, but this one did. The engines roared like thunder, and the skies above the alien council palace turned red with heat. Guards ran to their posts, alarms blared, but no one could stop what was coming. The hatch opened slowly, steam curling out like breath from an angry god. And then she stepped out. Lyra, once the silent girl given away as a joke, now walked with fire in her eyes. Her hands were bare, her cloak simple, but her presence crushed the air around her. Every step she took echoed like a challenge. At her side walked Elias, dressed in the clothes of his people, unarmed, unafraid, behind them, hidden beneath her skin was the heartbeat of new life, small, steady, and defiant. The council chamber doors opened wide without a single command. Elders stood in silence, unsure whether to speak or run. None of them laughed now. She stopped in the center of the room, the same place where they had once mocked her. Her voice was calm, but each word felt like it could crack the walls. "You sent me away like garbage," she said. "You gave me to a human to shame him, to shame me." No one replied. She turned, slowly, letting them see her, see what she had become. "You thought I would break," she said, "but I did not." Elias stepped forward beside her, not to protect her, not to lead, just to stand with her. As an equal, one of the elders tried to speak. "Why did you come back?" he asked. His voice sounded small in the giant room. Lyra looked him in the eye. "To show you what you created," she said. "Not the weapon, not the hybrid, not the threat you now fear, something better." She placed her hand gently on her stomach. "You created a mother." Gasps echoed through the chamber, but no one dared speak. The glow around her skin grew brighter, and the air shimmered. It wasn't power like war, it was life, blooming in defiance of cruelty. "They will be more than you," she continued. "More than me, more than human or alien. They will be the future you were too afraid to imagine." One by one, the elders lowered their heads. Not in shame, but in quiet understanding, because deep down, they knew this was the end of their control, and the beginning of something else. Outside the palace, people gathered. They didn't know her story, not all of it, but they saw how she stood with fire in her heart and love at her side, and they began to cheer. Elias looked at her and smiled. "We're going to need a bigger house," he whispered. She laughed softly, and for a moment, the world felt weightless. The stars above no longer looked cold. The joke was over, and its punchline had become legend.